Miller here, getting ready for the next session for the afternoon here. What we're looking at to start off with is we're going to start off with Jamie Whitehouse. And that way we can talk with Jamie Whitehouse, who is the product owner of Lifecycle. That's pretty exciting because Jamie and his team have been working on things for the last year that he can tell us about. The next thing that we're going to be doing after that is we'll be talking with DJ Schleen. We've become very good friends with DJ personally and professionally here at the office because he's such a nice guy to know. He's been on the speaking circuit for the last year now, telling the Aetna story. So if you want to know what it's like at a very large enterprise to be able to manage and roll out DevSecOps initiatives with the Nexus at the heart of it, DJ's got the story for that. Following DJ is Sarah Elkins, the CI/CD pipeline at the NIH, the National Cancer Institute. That's kind of close to my heart here. The idea that the people that are actually making a difference in the healthcare industry will be able to use our product and our platform to help with that. I mean, it gives real validation for the work that we're doing. I'm really happy to hear that story. And then we're going to talk with Jim Bird, again, one of the guys that we've known for years coming up. And Jim's now working with Bids Trading, and he's going to talk about quick wins for securing a continuous delivery. We got a good afternoon ahead of us there, so get yourself logged in and set up. Jamie, are you with us? I want to make sure that your mic is working as we're checking you in here. I see Jamie's cursor moving. Jamie, it looks like you are muted. Are you doing okay with that?
There we go. How's that?
All right. Just making sure that that we can hear you. Go ahead and talk a little bit, Jamie, just so that we can see things are working.
Sure thing. Testing. This is Jamie Whitehouse. I'm the now product owner of Nexus Lifecycle and Firewall.
So, as I said in the introduction here, Jamie is the head of the Lifecycle team. He's going to talk about things that you probably don't know about Lifecycle, the things that he and the team have been working on for the last 12 months, and I'll let you into the back door here. So, Jamie, I'm going to turn it over to you from here, and let's hear what you got.
All right. So first, a little introduction. As I mentioned, I'm the product owner of Nexus Lifecycle and Firewall. I've been here since the beginning of the product. Around 2011 is when we conceived of it. Then I was a developer, a tech lead, and more recently, I'm now the product owner. So I'm passionate about this product, passionate about making sure people know about what we have to offer as well. So this session, I thought I'd pick 5 features to show you in about 5 minutes. Some of these you may know, some of them you may not. Some of them you may find a new way to use to get some value out of. So here's the list. I'm going to show you about our LDAP servers, SuccessMetrix, Webhooks, our vulnerability information, and our new condensed data format. These are all reasons why keeping up to date with our releases is good. At least I would prefer you're up to date. You know, don't lag too much more than 3 months behind, but we know some people, their upgrade cycles are a lot longer. So here's some incentives. Multiple LDAP servers. You might be running a single LDAP server and wonder, why do I care? We've seen with many customers, their LDAP servers perform differently depending on the users they're looking for, the groups that they belong to. So how you want to associate your permissions inside of IQ server can dramatically affect how those users and permissions are retrieved from an LDAP server, especially with different indexes and things. We introduced multiple LDAP servers, and one of the things that you can do with it is actually create a configuration for the same LDAP server. The configuration is unique per your LDAP server configuration, even if it's connecting to the exact same server. So in this way, you can create a more performant configuration and put it near the top of your list. And the poorer performing configurations, which are maybe more unique or esoteric configurations to catch that one person who doesn't fit in the other groups can be near the bottom. So this is a way that you can improve the performance of IQ server with its LDAP lookups and potentially reduce the load on your LDAP server. It's there, it's been there for a while. At the end, I didn't want to shock everybody. So at the end, I'll show you which versions these were available in. Another one is SuccessMetrix. This one we rolled out last year over several releases, providing some value across each one of them. This lets you visualize the impact and adoption at a really high level. So on the screen here, I've got one metric. I'm going to flip to the actual application and show you a few others. You can configure it for an org. You can configure it for a number of apps, a specific app. The other thing that you can also configure it for is monthly aggregates, which is really useful if you're trying to put together a presentation, a quarterly presentation. Hey, how great are we doing? How's our adoption? And look at the fact that our vulnerabilities are going down or our license compliance is going up. And alternatively, you can also create a report that's live. So it shows you to the minute, basically. When an evaluation is done, the data is updated and it'll show up in the results. An important thing to notice with this as well, though, is they're per, the reports are per user. So you can't share the reports. This is yours. It's based on your permissions of which applications or which organizations you can see. I'm gonna try switching my screen here. So here's a demo. This is the same screenshot I put in the slide. So one of the things you can see is we kind of say, what's your average number of violations? That's often a thing we get. What's my average? How am I doing over time? And we break it down between critical and everything else. So you can kind of see the proportion representation here. We also break it down by the policy type, security versus license, etc. One of the most interesting reports I think that we have here, though, is the mean time to resolution by month. So in this chart, you can see how long it took to resolve something and when it was resolved. So of the items resolved in September, they took less than 25. In fact, it looks like it's probably closer to 15 days to resolve for the criticals. And then this was for all. So we separate them because typically when you're prioritizing, you want to look at your critical ones first. Those are the ones that you tell your developers and your security researchers and your teams, pay off the criticals first. So you can see here, we probably had one, and this was probably something that was around for a very long time, and we finally fixed it in September. So it took a long time to resolve. But if you look at our criticals, we're really good at addressing them, right? Usually between, I'm guessing here with the chart, 10 days, probably 10 to 15 days. And again, you hear me say I'm guessing at the chart. This is that high level view. It's not the precise, it's not I want to drill in. It's take a screenshot of this, put it in your slide deck, show your boss, show your manager, show your executives and say, look, we're using IQ very effectively here. Our time to resolve the criticals is less than a month, whereas before that was 60 days, 80 days, whatever. There's a couple other views in here. I'm not going to go into detail on every single one of them. This one here is application by violations by policy type. So how many applications are in that area? How many are impacted? So it gives you kind of an idea of the surface area or the bomb blast, so to speak. And then this last section here is again also really interesting, is of your components, how are they used? So again, this is filtered down to the applications you have visibility to and the applications that you configured for this SuccessMetrix report. In this case, you can see that we're using 20 applications. On average, there's 117 components per app. And here's the ones that are used most across the apps. And so again, this kind of shows you that bomb blast radius or potentially efficiencies, right? I'm using a lot of components shared across my applications, which is fantastic because if there's bugs or issues, one team can investigate, and I get that learning across all teams instead of everybody being unique and having a lot of duplicated effort. And then also in the component section, we highlight the components raising the most policy violations. In the Maven world, the GAV is really long, so you got to roll over the tooltip. You can see this is the driver. This one's for tars. This one's for zips. So TrueZip has got a violation that probably impacts all of its code base. So that's why it's cranking up the scores here. That's SuccessMetrix. You're probably not going to use it on a day-to-day basis, but it's really valuable to highlight to your stakeholders how things are going. Also, you could use it to review with your team. If you're reviewing with your team on a monthly basis, you can pull this up and you can be like, last month we were doing okay. This month we're not. What happened? Since you can narrow this down to a per application. Go back to the presentation. So this other one is webhooks. We introduced webhooks. There's a variety of them. The one I'm showing here is the application evaluation event. This is really useful for external integrations instead of having to hit up our REST API, constantly pinging it. Is it here? Do you have anything new? Trying to do a diff. All the reasons why you would use a webhook is why you would use this. In this case, we've seen Bree, one of our content developers and educators. She worked with Justin to highlight how to do an integration with webhooks, and I'll have a link to that later on. But the result is you can see that we've done a policy evaluation and it shows up in my Slack channel and it tells me I've got 11 critical violations. So very similar to any of your CI servers, the build's failed or it's become unstable, you get a message in the channel. Your production systems were experiencing higher traffic load, you get a message in your channel. A support ticket comes in that the support team wants to get a hold of you. They mark it as expedite, it shows up in your channel. Right? So you're in your channel and you get the notification. So this is really useful for those kinds of notifications around evaluations. Like I said, we do have other webhooks also available. They're more for events about changes, things like the policy configuration has changed. Those ones are good if you're trying to keep track of when policy has changed, if you have a policy administrator who needs to review them. You can check out our help content for the various webhooks and what their payloads look like. I think I'm on to number 4 now. This is our vulnerability information. It's not terribly new. It's been around for a long time, but often it is the first thing that we're asked, right? Is users, new customers, existing customers, people who've been with us for a long time, but their new users are new, or it's a new security researcher or a new developer. And it's like, what can you tell me about this vulnerability? Why would I look at your information instead of just going to the CVS website, or sorry, the CVE website, or going off to Apache's security bulletin? So I wanted to highlight this. This is what it looks like. We call it the enhanced vulnerability information. It's the vulnerability information that our researchers here do. They curate it, and it's not just curate, cut and paste, it's deep dive investigation. And I wanted to kind of show some of that in context here. On our website, our help site, we have a whole section that talks about what our vulnerability data is, why it's significant, how it's different than what you can get publicly, what our team does. For this example, I reached to something that was really similar, really recent. We wrote up a blog post. It's about Marked, which has a regex DOS vulnerability in it. And the reason why this is significant is there was some contention between other researchers in the public and the project itself. The project really wanted to fix the problem, but they wanted to understand the problem. And there was a lot of discussion and contention around it. So I'll get to that part in a minute, but I wanted to highlight the effect. the vulnerability is pretty severe. So marked as a Node.js package. You run it on your server side if you want. You can use it in the browser. On the server side, as we see in the blog post, it's particularly problematic because Node.js is single-threaded. You can basically perform a denial of service attack against a server. So with a little under 10K of data, you can block the event loop for 5 minutes. There's a bunch of caveats that's highlighted in this article around the data limit that often HTTP headers and payloads provide. And so we did this is again that real world test. This is up to that limit. So you're blocking your app for up to 5 minutes. If you haven't read the post, I encourage you to read it. I'm use it as a segue here since it's recent. And to highlight that it's recent, it actually affects 0319. So this isn't just a fictitious example where we grabbed something from a long time ago and said, hey, let's make a fuss over this kind of thing. It's recent, it's prominent. I did an evaluation with Lifecycle here. So here's the results. It actually has 3 vulnerabilities, and I want to take you through that. This is the specific one that's mentioned in the blog post. And you can see we're still affected, 040. This winds up being our own, so you can see that it has its own Sonatype identifier. This one here, 2018-0076. It all started way back when, and with this CVE though. This is something that came through the National Vulnerability Database, NVD. You can see it came through, and through the conversation that the project team had with the original researchers, which weren't Sonatype, they came to the conclusion that the vulnerability they reported against the NVD was inaccurate. So they updated the description. They said, don't use this. We rescind our vulnerability. We were incorrect. And you can go read about it all on the GitHub pull request or issue number as well. But it's basically highlighting there's a RDoS attack. Go find a non-vulnerable version. So later on, it came up again. Here's some of the things that our security researchers do. So we have a deviation, right? We found out about it. We looked at it. They said it was actually fixed or introduced in a certain version, and we've done our diligence to highlight the specific versions it affects. It may be a range, it may be a discontinuous range, but we went and checked those versions and found out which versions are specific. That way you can have automated enforcement on it. And then we also note this in here because you may be looking at the public information and saying, well, why is it different? Why Sonatype do you think it's so different? And we explain that right here. And then this is the one that's mentioned in the blog post. So you can see we explain it. It can be exploit. It can make your process unresponsive, blocking subsequent requests, and basically filling up your queue on your server side. And that's our enhanced vulnerability information, the curated information that we do the deep dive research on. And number 5 is our condensed data format. This came out earlier this year. Most of our customers have a smallish database where we store all of our information, the violation information and configuration and stuff. Smallish being like less than 50 megabytes, usually less than a gigabyte. We do have a set of customers though where that's not the norm. They're in the gigabytes or tens of gigabytes. And that starts to affect performance, it starts to affect provisioning, it starts to affect backups. And given the fact that we know all customers are going to increase their adoption as new applications come on board, new versions, as you're keeping track of what's out in production, as new violations come up, given the fact that violations happen over time as your components age, we knew everybody's data was going to grow over time. So we sat down late last year I think it probably started at the tail end of the summer, and started really looking at the problem, how to solve it, what we could solve. Were there interesting and novel ways? And the development team took a few different takes at it, looked at it from different perspectives to see what we could save and what impact that actually had to performance, right? We don't want to save space if all of a sudden performance drops, right? Your request duration takes longer, the time to do evaluations take longer and all that. We don't want that. So we came upon a solution in our own testing against various data set sizes of different models. We saw conservatively a 50% reduction, in some cases a 75% reduction in disk space. In what we've seen in the real world, we have a customer who went from over 100 gigabytes down to, I think they're at less than 15 gigabytes now. I think they might be 12 or something like that. So a massive reduction in size. This also comes with a bit of a challenge because we've rearranged the way we store the data, so we have to convert the data. And given your environment, we don't know how long that's going to take. So this is actually one of the rare disrupting changes that we have in our releases. And you have to explicitly acknowledge that you want to go ahead with the release when you bring the server up. You have to explicitly acknowledge that you want to go ahead with the release because it could take an unknown duration, and that might turn into an outage window. A normal release is you upgrade in place and it's just a restart of the server and you're done. But in this case, the outage might be 30 minutes, it might be 10 seconds, it might be 5 hours. It really depends on your disks. It depends on the I/O with those disks. It depends on the data set itself. So we actually have a whole page that tries to walk you through this very carefully. And again, I'll share some links later, but it talks about how to upgrade, why you should upgrade, what you want to look at. And so you can read the bullet points here, right? Make sure you have enough disk space. You want to do a database compaction before. Afterwards, you also want to do a database compaction. That doesn't have to be immediate. You could schedule it in a different window. But because each customer is different, we want to provide enough information for them to make the right decisions in their environment, rather than us making one size fit all and having a detrimental impact for some customers and no impact for others. So that was 5 in, looking at my clock, less than 5 minutes, I think. So the big reveal, when did these come out? Most of them were last year, as you can see. Some were this year, and one was a long time ago. So multiple LDAP servers is actually almost 2 years old now. It came out in January of 2017. SuccessMetrix came out. The last feature we added for SuccessMetrix was in September of last year. Like I said, throughout all of last year, we were delivering features around SuccessMetrix. It wasn't a dark launch. It was something you could use. It started off with the root org, and then we kept adding more and more functionality so different people could use it instead of waiting until the end of September. Webhooks were out again in the same release that multiple LDAP servers was in January of last year. So 2 years. You've got 2 years that you could have been using it. The vulnerability information's been around since 2015. Again, I highlighted it because many people ask, what's the difference between you and public information? What can you help me with? Why would I use your information? So I wanted to highlight that because it's almost every single user winds up looking at it or interacting with it or asking us those questions. Whereas something like LDAP servers, it's your administrator. They notice it, they set it up, and it's done. And again, the condensed data format, that's fairly new. It's on 146 is the release you should use. 145, we noticed a couple of performance enhancements that we could do in addition. So we made those and rolled them into 146. So these are all good reasons why if you stay recent, you get the good stuff. You watch the release notes to kind of see what's new. We have the new community. And so in the community, I'm sure people will be talking about the things that are new and how they're using them there as well. Thank you for attending.
All right. Jamie, a couple things came up as I was listening to you. Some very interesting stuff. As you're looking at the features that have been developed in the last year, what do you think is the most unused feature that has the most value?
Hmm. So I would say SuccessMetrix. It's probably one of the biggest things, and the reason why it has the most value is the pictures are really nice out of the box. You can cut and paste. You don't have to create your own charts, um, but it takes the work. It takes the work off of your plate to create the information and distill it in a way that says, here's what we're doing with our server, with IQ server, with Lifecycle. And in a way that you can then configure on a per organization basis or a per application basis or an aggregate, and be able to take that to various audiences. Like I said, you could take it to your teams. You go to a team once a week or every bug triage or something like that, and you're looking at that. You can take it up to your executives and say, look, our adoption is on track or it's not. Like maybe your adoption's not on track. You expected to have 50 applications by now and you don't. What are we going to do about that? So I think it's probably the one that most people don't know about, because it's easy to dismiss it because it doesn't help your day to day. But I think it definitely helps you in the long run.
Excellent. The other one that kind of caught my eye here was the webhooks into Slack. That's a very cool implementation. Can you do that into Slack or Jira or HipChat?
Yep. So you can use webhooks to integrate into anything. You Brianne or Bree, sorry, and Justin, they have an excellent write-up of how to do it, and you could follow that template for anything that could take webhooks into Slack, into HipChat. You want it to send some notice and turn the light green versus red. You can do all that with the webhook.
All right. Thank you. And thank you for all the work you're doing. Very much appreciate it.